Nostalgia can be a lovely thing. The practice of recalling fond memories and circumstances attached to things that spark joy is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. 2020 seems like the perfect time to find solace in the warm fuzzies of the past as a distraction to a global pandemic making its way across the planet. Final Fantasy VII is one of those distractions, a game I think fondly of because it served as my first foray into Square's storied RPG series. It made a significant impression on me the first time through, and since then I've replayed it several times and have even used the soundtrack, which is Nobuo Uematsu's best work, to help me fall asleep on more than one occasion. Final Fantasy VII is important to me, and because of that, I was eager to indulge with Final Fantasy VII Remake, a lavish, big-budget reproduction of the 1997 RPG that defined my formative years. 23 years and 30 hours later, I'm struggling with how to feel about an adventure that stays true to its source and still defies expectations. It may come as a surprise to some that the entirety of Final Fantasy VII Remake takes place inside Midgar, the Mako-powered megacity owned and operated by the Shinra Electric Power Company. Square Enix has essentially taken the first of 3 discs from the original PlayStation game and blown it up into a fully featured title, taking the opportunity to retell old stories and share new ones. They'll take the lead as Cloud Strife, the former Shinra soldier with blonde spiky hair and a too large to be usable buster sword, as he assists in a bombing raid by Avalanche, who wants Shinra to stop harvesting the planet's Mako energy as a power source. This, of course, is old news to anyone who has played Final Fantasy VII. Stoic and soft-spoken, Cloud has no time to suffer fools and sees his work with the ragtag faction of Avalanche as a job, nothing more. All that changes after the true gravity of Shinra's machinations are revealed, turning the city into a powder keg with a ghost from Cloud's past holding the match. The fundamentals of Final Fantasy Remake are strong, built on top of a narrative that uses the original game's most defining and memorable encounters and developments. As Cloud, you'll raid Mako reactors, wander the neon-soaked streets of Wall Market, experience a chance encounter with a sweet young lady selling flowers, and making a heroic ascent to Midgar's upper plates. In the original game, the Midgar chapter filled a few hours, and to justify selling a third of the entire game at full price, Square Enix introduced a lot of new material and expanded content inside a large, interconnected open-world recreation of Midgar. Bearing a degree of resemblance from Final Fantasy XV, Midgar has been transformed into a living, breathing, explorable space, rendered in a way that makes it look far more realistic than the pre-rendered backgrounds of old, which clearly have been used as source material. Midgar consists of settlements and explorable territories occupied by a modest collection of monster types. Players familiar with the game and its locations will delight in how perfectly areas have been adapted to 3D environments. Some of these areas look okay, I'm not sure how you would go about beautifying the Sector 7 slums, but others are requisite in their detail. One of the more breathtaking places in the game is the Wall Market, Midgar's red light district, and I'd say it's nearly worth the price of admission.
No, it's special.
Another benefit of rebuilding Final Fantasy VII from the ground up is creating a better representation of the cast of characters. Back in 1997, all of the in-game models were made up of stocky polygons that ran at odds with their plastic action figure counterparts used in CG cutscenes. In 2020, there's a greater consistency across both character designs as Cloud, Tifa, and even a certain Red Tiger were transformed into realistic-looking people while retaining the unique visual identifiers that help them stand out from a crowd, like Barrett's tattoo, Aerith's red ribbon, Jessie's armor, and Tifa's, well, Not only do these characters look like real people, but they also act like them too. Characters feel much more realized now that they've been given the ability to emote instead of relying on dialogue boxes to express themselves. Characters who were already endearing are made even more now. Jessie is sweet, fun, and flirty, Wedge is thoroughly wholesome, and Aerith makes you want to take on the world for her. Their added humanity goes a long way to make certain sequences and plot developments all the more impactful. And yet, most of the time the characters in Final Fantasy VII Remake act as if they're in an anime, their movements often punctuated by those telltale and exaggerated head nods, finger pointing, and excited heel bobbing.
Still, it's kind of funny. Us going our separate ways, thinking that must be it. That we'd never meet again, and then here of all places we do. You know what? We should totally celebrate. Let's dress up and hit the town.
Really?
I mean, why not? It'll be fun.
Do you even have fancy clothes?
Not like fancy, but I'll figure something out. What do you think would suit me, huh?
Your journey through Midgar offers a lot of opportunities to engage with the locals, completing odd jobs in exchange for experience points and gil. These side missions will invariably lead the party into direct conflict with monsters that also benefit from the game's 3D facelift. As ridiculous as some of the Final Fantasy VII creatures looked, their designs remain faithful to the original, which means you'll encounter a lot of bipedal mechs, flying dragons, smog-spewing robots, rats, and other monstrosities. Combat forgoes the original game's menu-based encounters, pushing for a more hands-on, real-time approach a la Final Fantasy XV. As the party leader, you can direct self-moving AI characters through a menu interface on the fly, or take full control and guide their actions. Combat is directed by a newer form of the active time battle, a meter that governs the use of special skills. ATB meters slowly fill on their own, but move faster when the characters use their standard repertoire of attacks or are influenced by helpful buffs. A full ATB bar gives you the freedom to use a character's special weapon abilities, magic, and heavy-hitting limit breaks. Magic is used by equipping a character's weapon and equipment slots with materia, which function the same way as they did in 1997. Materia levels up with use, providing new and more powerful iterations of its magics, and can be combined with special materia that offer stat boosts and bonus effects, like the Synergy materia that allows a second party member to cast the same exact spell as the party leader. One modification the remake made for magic that I really liked was the elimination of the All materia, which would cast a spell against all enemies or allies if combined with another. Instead, upgraded Ra and Aga offensive spells automatically target an entire group. The remake's combat system is far more exciting and goes out of its way to make the player feel involved. There are roles for the characters to fulfill that go a long way during protracted encounters. Barret and Aerith, for example, are great range fighters that can attack from a distance and are the only ones who can fight enemies out of reach of the melee-based party members. There are so many combat tools at the player's disposal that are in service to the new pressured and staggered combat mechanics. Not unlike Sekiro, all enemies have a meter that governs their status in battle, and frequent repeated attacks from the player will fill up that meter until they fall under pressure and eventually stagger. When staggered, the party is free to wail on their incapacitated foe, unleashing nearly double damage for a limited time. The benefits of staggering are more visible against the game's meteor boss monsters, who can only be significantly damaged once they've entered such a state. Combat is really great at engaging the player, especially during battles against bosses that drastically turn the tables in their favor on a dime, disrupting the flow of battle with devious tricks that force the player to think on their toes. Boss encounters are also the only real opportunity to use the game's limited supply of summon materia. The mechanics of summoning follow close alongside Final Fantasy XV in that their use is limited to encounters against what the game calls more powerful and dangerous foes. What this means is that you won't be summoning Ifrit to help you in a fight against regular Shinra grunts. Instead, a timer pops up in the middle of whatever the game qualifies as a difficult fight as a means to give you an extra edge. Once called, summon characters engage the enemy, with the player choosing which attacks to dish out, for a short time before launching their signature ability and flying away. Character progression, in terms of leveling up, is handled through experience points that allow the party to grow into their abilities. What really matters though is the time you put in with materia and the party's equipment. Battles earn AP points towards materia that make them more powerful over time. The characters also get points to spend on upgrading their weapons with a new mechanic that lets you decide how you want to spec a character's build. Weapons can either be physical or magic attack based, and the stats you purchase reflect that, offering a boost to magical ability and power, or increase the effectiveness of physical attacks by increasing attack power. Points can also be spent to add new materia slots if available, add health, and make the player buffs more effective and long-lasting. The new attention paid to weapon upgrades is great because it gives you a better feeling of ownership over them, considering there aren't a whole lot of them to collect. A lot of thought, care, and attention was put into developing Final Fantasy VII Remake as a faithful retelling of the original game. However, this is not a one-to-one experience. Square Enix took the opportunity to make a lot of modifications to the plot in ways that are a surprise and a challenge. The deep dive into the ancillary members of Avalanche is fantastic because they are given far more depth. The frequent allusions to a war between Shinra and Wutai that drives the form's globe-spanning ambitions offers a hint of how the larger game might develop. And the introduction of Wall Market's key movers and shakers that you have to ingratiate to made it one of my favorite portions of the game. The music has also been remixed, transformed into a genre-hopping experience that I am definitely a fan of. Other new additions don't congeal quite as well as they should. The introduction of a motorcycle-loving antagonist who sets himself up to be Cloud's rival is the kind of character you get sick of the second he opens his mouth. And most puzzling are the new ghostly spirits that frequently antagonize the party, which is something that is never wholly explained in a way that was satisfactory to me. And then there's Sephiroth, the fan-favorite character who makes a stunning number of appearances throughout the game, which kind of reduces his presence to that of a nagging ghost, thereby diminishing his mystery. And it's not just characters old and new that cause some problems. There are entire chapters that feel needlessly drawn out to fill out the time. If I'm ever going to play through this game again, I would wish to skip the entirety of Shinra's Science Division because it's awfully repetitive and really serves no purpose other than to run out the clock before the end of the story. The finale, though, is the biggest offender because it feels like Square Enix developed a super epic final boss encounter just for the sake of having a super epic final boss encounter. Nothing about it is exciting in any meaningful way, and in some ways it reminds me of the silly endgame battle in Kingdom Hearts 2, where they made Sora and Riku fight through a boss's 5 different forms, each more ridiculous than the last. The final boss in Final Fantasy VII Remake, though, feels so decidedly out of place to the point of disruption, especially since the encounter is mostly hand-waved away afterwards, cutting to show the familiar aftermath of the party's infiltration of Shinra. Final Fantasy VII Remake is an enigmatic thing, a product born out of nostalgia but reimagined and redesigned to take advantage of technology and hardware that could capture the grandeur of this particularly beloved adventure. If you've played the original before, don't go in thinking that you'll know exactly what's going to happen, because really, the story takes a good number of unexpected left turns. These changes are mostly fine, but I'm curious to see what sort of tweaks will be made to the larger story in light of some of the more dramatic changes, with special regards to a final boss that screams, "Well, we just couldn't help ourselves." Final Fantasy VII Remake is a fresh take on a familiar story, expanded with a larger scope that just wasn't possible 23 years ago. DarkStation gives Final Fantasy VII Remake 4 stars.